So, welcome everybody to this week's Safety Roundtable. Thank you for joining me. I've been looking forward to this topic after a couple of weeks of respite, and we've got an interesting topic next week as well, which I'm sure will get the juices flowing in terms of some thoughts and get some discussions going. So, my role here is to get the discussion started, get you thinking about this, and then we can discuss this topic, which is how to overcome the risk versus priority gap in safety. And I'll explain what I mean about that, or what I mean by that in a second. So here's the background. We recently did some research. We surveyed over 300 health and safety leaders, and we produced the results in a report called the State of Safety 2022. And as part of that report, we did our own research, but we also analysed some prior research that IOSH and HSE did about, 14 years ago, as well, and compared and contrasted. Some of the questions we asked, we're going to delve into, and that's what gives us this insight that there's a gap between risks and priorities. But if this is your first time on the roundtable, or watching this or listening to this on the podcast when we release it on the podcast, just a quick intro into me. So my name's Christian Harris, and I run a business called Slip Safety Services. I do various types of safety and risk related content, but in my day job I specialise in the prevention of slip and fall accidents, and in that field I've worked in some high profile cases. The business has won some awards. We've got some great partnerships with the likes of AXA and PHS, whose office I'm sitting in today as we record this, and we support some big blue chip clients. We've worked with several thousand sites over the years and helped them to make their floors safer, to reduce the risk of slips. And at last count, we're stopping with our clients about 10 million a year of slip and fall insurance claims. So going into the state of safety questions then, one of the questions we asked was, which of the following issues are potentially relevant to workers in and or customers of your organisation? And there's a list here of about 9 different options. The most relevant was slips, then trips, then back problems. Then there's a bit of a gap between sort of 80% relevancy to sort of 60% relevancy to falls from height, vehicular accidents and repetitive strain injury. And then there's another bit of a gap down to sort of 40-ish%, saying respiratory problems, hand-arm vibration and skin problems. So these are the risks that our organisations are facing as a percentage. So there are lots of commonalities, and those big 3 were very, very common indeed. The next thing we asked was, what are your biggest causes of incidents and costs? Because, just because the risk is relevant doesn't necessarily mean that the risk happens, right? A, and B, we've got control measures in place. So we'd expect to see a gap between relevancy and causation. But the causation kind of mirrored in many ways the risk relevancy, in that slips, then trips, then back problems were the 3 biggest. Then there was a bit of a gap to the bunch of vehicular accidents, falls from height, repetitive strain injury, although they're in a slightly different order, and there is a bit of a gap between them, and then another gap to the last 3. So risk relevancy and causation are pretty well correlated. Next, we ask people, which of those 9 things are your highest priorities? And again, interestingly, there's a pretty good correlation here. So the biggest area of priority was slips, then trips, then back problems, then vehicular accidents, then falls from height, then RSI, then respiratory, then hand-arm vibration, then skin problems. So there's actually a fairly good correlation here in terms of the ordering of these issues. There's only one category, and I can't remember which it is off the top of my head. I think it's vehicular accidents and falls from height flips in order in one of the lists, but broadly speaking, there's a quite good correlation. So on the face of it, we're looking at where we have relevant risks. We're looking at the causes of incidents and claims, and we're placing our priority in broadly the same places. But if we drill a little bit deeper, there is a bit of a gap between priorities and risks. And that's the interesting thing that I'm keen for us to delve into today. So this chart here is showing biggest causes of incidents and costs versus highest priorities and comparing the two. And there's a line in the middle, which is 0%. So if it was 0%, the cause and the causation and the priority would be exactly the same. So in other words, if 80% of people said slips was a cause and 80% of people said it was the high priority, that would be 0. What we're seeing, though, is interestingly, there is a big difference on those first three: slips, trips, back problems, and other causes of incidents and risks. And what this chart shows is that with the bunch of slips, trips, and back problems, there's a higher risk exposure but a lower relative priority. So more people say it's relevant, more people say it's causing incidents and claims costs, yet, relatively speaking, we're placing a lower priority on those areas. And then we've got a bunch here on the other side, which includes falls from height, vehicular accidents, respiratory problems, and hand-arm vibration, where we've actually got a lower risk exposure and lower causation, but we place a higher relative priority on these particular topics. RSI and skin problems, interestingly, are pretty much spot on. So the priority we place on those versus the causation and the risk exposure is basically in equilibrium. So there's an interesting mix there between the types of incident, and I'd be interested to get your feedback in a second on why that might be. But the first question I've got is, what do you think about that? Is that a problem? Is that gap that we've identified there between relative risk exposure versus relative prioritization, do you think that's a problem or not? Let me know yes, no in the chat. And if you'd like to comment, then stick your hand up. And if you don't have to do that, I think you go to reactions. Is that right? I think you go to reactions and put your hand up. David has asked me a question in the chat, just as a DM. How big was the sample size? So this is about 330. Was this sample, and it's across industries, and they are safety professionals. So who's got some thoughts on this? Do we think? Kevin, you raised your hand. Do you want to unmute yourself and give us your thoughts?
Yeah, mate. I was just sitting thinking about that when you, while you guys were talking there. I wonder if people are basing that on actual incidents, near-miss incidents, or perceived risk. And so, for example, when it comes to I wonder how many people out there are actually measuring a near miss versus, for potential severity versus actual, severity, or do you see what I mean? I wonder how much of those graphs there are actually related to real incidents, or if they are near misses, and if people would measure the near misses against potential severity, if they were actually realized, if that would impact that graph. Just I don't know the answer to that question. I just thought, with the whole talking about risks, how are we measuring our near miss risk, or are we just going, it was a near miss, we got away with it? So I just wanted to float that out there and see what some of the other people in the audience said. It was just something that popped in my head while I was listening to you.
Yeah, yeah. And look, this is one data set, but it's an interesting thing that came out. If you think about these TV ads that show 97% of women say this shampoo is great, and then you see the sample size is 33. We're dealing with a much bigger data set than that. But what I'd like to do, and I'm looking forward to doing in future years, is expanding on this and trying to get more people involved in doing the research. Olga says, it might be a problem, but it's interesting to investigate it further. And I liked your train of thought there, Kevin, because I'm going to come on to that. Here's a thought then, and I've not got the answer to this. I'm here to provoke a discussion. But here's a thought. Here's another question we asked people. Please rank these outcomes in order of importance to you personally right now. So these are safety leaders in a business. Fewer people getting hurt was number one. Number two was having certainty that my top risks are under control. Number three was fewer riddles. And then it was lower overall cost of risk to the business, lower claim costs, less admin, e.g. investigation time, and lower insurance premiums. So here's a way of thinking about that potential gap that we might have identified in the context of this, the answer to this question. So if we had done that survey and asked that same question with exactly the same options to a bunch of board members, so non-safety professional people, what do we think that their priorities might be, and how would they differ from what we're saying? Now, I suspect, David, you've got your hand up. Go on, come in. Feel free to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Christian. Yeah, interesting. I've got a PhD student doing work on leadership and followership, and the question we were asking is leadership, safety leadership, and consider the scenario where, see, I don't believe that the health and safety professional is the health and safety lead. The health and safety lead can believe he's the health and safety lead, but if the chief exec isn't into it at all, then we won't get the board recognition. The health and safety lead has to be the board lead, very often has to be the chief exec, MD. Some organisation, charities, it could be the chair of the board of trustees and things such as that. But I think even the question of who you define as safety leader is not necessarily the business leader. And I think that the problem is that we in health and safety talk to ourselves thinking we're the people in charge. We're not. As the health and safety law says, and I think I mentioned the other day, we are there to assist. We're walking sticks and Zimmer frames. We are not there to take the responsibility.
Yeah.
And because of that, because I think IOSH and the profession itself has talked itself into with safety leaders, the people at the top have kind of got away with it and thought of, I don't need to think about it. And they hope they don't get involved in it. And a strange thing from a couple of local authorities I work for, and one person will report to a head of HR, and we can debate the role of HR in health and safety. Are they the problem or the solution? That's one maybe for a future discussion. I believe this particular person was the problem. I looked at her LinkedIn CV and she was the safety leader. Extremely interesting. That was on LinkedIn, by the way. So I think there's a lot of how we perceive things. It's about we looking at ourselves rather than other people looking in.
Yeah. Yeah. Simon, you had your hand up.
Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant, it actually works this time. Couldn't agree more with David, but this highlights the issue with your graph and the results and how you look at it with what might the board's priorities be. Yes, the safety leaders are the CEOs, the CFOs, and they're looking at different priorities, and that's the problem.
Yeah, I think that's that potentially is something. Eilish, you've got your hand up. How are you?
Yeah, I think I'm absolutely really impressed with what David's saying, because I think we're all agreeing with it in the chat. I think from personal experience, from kind of speaking with board members and being that kind of safety lead within a business, it's not important to them until it needs to be important to them, and then all of a sudden you become this kind of mini celebrity, I guess. Everybody kind of wants a piece of you. They kind of want your guidance and your thoughts, but only when they deem it a priority, I guess. So I guess, with COVID as an example, for me, I suddenly got really busy when COVID was happening, when COVID was a priority, because suddenly, we needed to keep people safe and provide safeguarding guidance. So it's just really interesting, isn't it, to kind of view from a different mindset, I guess, the people that are right at the top versus, us little people at the bottom, the Zimmer frames, as David said.
David and I had a chat with a few other people the other day about sort of the future direction of the safety profession. I think, is that the right word, David, that we settled on, or vocation or whatever. But and one of the things we were talking about was that we've got a good opportunity now off the back of the pandemic, that we have a higher profile, but we've got to keep pushing and keep trying to maintain that. We've got the opportunity to be more engaged and more involved and to drive the agenda more than we did 5 years ago, let's say. We've got to keep our foot on the pedal. David, go on.
Yeah, it opens up. It actually does open up the future of us as professionals, and that's distinct from the safety of the profession in inverted commas. If the people at board level don't have our values, and I use the word our values because we do have a belief in what we're doing. If buying, I heard this story about buying 15, 20 years ago. So it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. The only way you will get that change is we have to get board level roles, and we will not do it with a health and safety qualification. We have to become business leaders and have to adapt and have to have to take on that challenge to get onto board level on merit. At that point, we can then hopefully start to infer our values as peers with other directors. I think that's the only achieving. I'm too old for it, but a younger generation, I think, need to maybe do MBAs, HR qualifications. Interesting, I believe the ex-chair of NEBOSH, she told me once that she didn't just have a health and safety qualification. She was COPD, had COPD membership as well. So we have to consider our professions being distinct from professionals, which means a lot more hard work. It means we have to continue our careers and studies and lifelong learning far longer. And again, IOS don't pursue this message because it's outside of their safe zone. So if you can't change people, you have to join them and then change them.
Yeah. Yeah. Eilish, you did have your hand up and you put it down.
Yeah, I completely agree with David here. And I just kind of wanted to share something that you might find funny. I did a business case presentation for why we needed to kind of really ramp up health and safety and why it was important to have an actual health and safety policy for a global company. The best response I had was, we're not a sweatshop, so we don't need a health and safety policy. So I just thought I'd share that with you. This is coming from a global company perspective. That's the vibe.
Nice.
Yeah, it's great. So.
Oh dear. David has put in the chat, as the risk person on this call, I'd suggest risk management as a good route for board access, and I fully agree. That's kind of why I, in my podcast, for example, although a lot of what I'm talking about is safety related stuff, I talk about safety and risk because I do think, that the risk management function is one that can get onto the board. And safety and health can be a big part of that, and that is a route if you can sort of look to slightly, broaden your skill set into some of these broader risk topics, where you can, I'm not saying in a company of 20 people they're not going to have a risk management director, but in a large company, a risk management director is a good aspiration for us to aim for. I would say. David, you put your hand up. Did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily because I sit on board, because I currently don't, which is absolutely fine. Now, I wanted to sort of come back to the question here, because at the heart of what might the board's priorities be. It was really interesting looking at your previous slide with the difference between the comparables between what people have actually said and what things are actually being done. Perception comes into this and bias comes into this greatly. I don't know if you're able to go back to the previous slide.
Yeah.
One of the things I reflected on when I looked at it, that one there, yeah. You know, the reason why I think the falls from height, your vehicle accidents and your respiratory problems are probably disproportionately reflecting there is because out of all of those, they're the ones that have the highest risk to life.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, we can't beat around the bush. That is what boards are really concerned about. Protect me from someone dying, and the rest of it will sort itself out. Having joined a company who had a fatality from a health and safety incident back in 2018, it's really interesting how that has changed the whole culture of this business that I'm in. And actually, whilst it's a horrible thing to have happened, in many ways it was one of the better things to have happened from a safety perspective, because everybody understands now that at the end of all of this is something that actually is really quite important, both for our colleagues in our business, but also, you know, by extension to CEOs, CFOs, MDs, and the like. So I think that's worth putting in. And of course, the bit about risk is all about perception to a degree. Yeah. Unless you work in the financial industry where it's all ones and noughts, actually your assessment of risk is going to be about perception, and therefore it's going to be subject to bias.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's good. And certainly someone who has, he's not here today, so I don't want to give too much detail, but someone else who's been on some of the roundtable calls, his business had a fatality. You might have heard me talk about it before because it was one that I was involved in, and that led to a huge swathe of changes and improvements off the back of that. So it's sad that these things have to happen, but it's a bit like COVID, isn't it, as well? You know, it's analogous to that. This massive event happened where,
and I suppose the challenge for health and safety professionals is how can you get that change without that fatality? And that's the real struggle that I think everybody probably on the call faces is how do you make people make the change that is going to happen anyway if you have a fatality? How do you get it done without that fatality?
Yeah, and the conversation that I referenced that David and I had earlier this week, one of the things that I raised was that we've got this platform now, but we might not have it forever. We should be trying to invest in some kind of research, case studies. I don't know what exactly format it takes, but around what I guess I would call the value of safe or the value of safety or something like that, to try to build this business case that is unquestionable and that has lots of data points from around different industries and sectors and so on and so forth, and coming together to try to evidence why and to answer that question, so that we're not waiting for something bad to happen, but we can be more proactive. That's certainly what I that's the kind of vision that I would love to see coming into place. Frank, you've got your hand up. How are you today?
Hi, thanks. I'm fine, great, and thank you for being here. I'm in a lucky position that I'm in an industry where safety has the highest priority, where the board is involved as well. I'm working in the offshore and shipping industry, and there the customers are also setting the standards as well, because an incident is more or less, if it's bad enough, equal to lost business opportunities, because then the customer says, we do not want to be engaged with you because you do not prioritize safety. So in that respect, the boards in these shipping companies, offshore companies that I have been involved with, that is top priority. So that's really, really nice. And it is really being, what do I call it, lived by heart. The CEOs definitely knows what is safety, because they also would like to see that nobody is being hurt while going on work or being at work, that's for sure. So I feel quite lucky being in such a business where safety has this priority.
And do you think, Frank, that that's driven by kind of what David was just saying, that, you know, there have been obviously in your industry some very catastrophic events in the past? Do you think it's driven clearly that is going to be driving it to some extent, but do you think it's driven in large part by that, or are there other factors at play that are perhaps more important?
Yeah, in parts, yes, that's for sure, because there have been some quite big disastrous accidents in the industry where I'm working, and of course it has caused headlines, and the public opinions and etc. have asked, where have you put your priorities in protecting the safety of the people at your workplace? So of course that have been driven by that as well. But again, people can, CEOs and etc., can put themselves in the seat of the relatives to those who have been injured at work. So driven by that as well. So that's good that the compassion for other people has been driving the process as well.
Definitely. Isaac, you've got your hand up. Do you want to unmute yourself and join in?
Yeah. Hello. Can you hear me, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Hello, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. Thank you. Very, very good discussion, this one. I would just want to highlight, and obviously this will always be about the industry in which you work for, isn't it? The graph that we are looking at now. Because obviously if you work in the construction industry, if you work in in other industry, manufacturing industry, you have other focuses on. So I believe that the perception of risk or how to manage is all about the industry in which you work for. In the recent year, in the construction industry, they're focusing on mental health, which is a big thing, because they were saying that people that work in the construction industry, most of them, they committed probably suicide because of mental health issue, which they couldn't speak to anyone.
Yeah.
Based on the fact that obviously the construction industry is dominated by male, and it's quite hard for a man to, voice out the emotions and so forth. So I believe that obviously this graph is all based on, various industries, but I think there is a gap on talking about mental health, which has been in the, past years a very, very big topic, and that's causing more death or more ill health, let's say hours of work lost than any other accident or incident that could the industry brings to anyone. So I believe that probably in probably next year, or when you're doing another let's say this kind of survey, then probably mental health will mental health will come on, and probably can discuss that as well in another one of your topics then. So,
yeah, definitely. You. I think it'd be good to with this research, I deliberately stuck to safety, so that we had a picture of safety, and obviously because I think that health is a massively important topic, but it's a different topic, although clearly we do sometimes get these things bundled together, and that's another thing we were talking about the other day. There's a few of you with your hands up. What I'm going to do, guys, is I'm just going to cycle through and finish the slides, because there's only a couple more slides to go, and then we can carry on chatting if that's okay. I just want to give you a bit of further context just to sort of give a bit more thought to this. So yeah, we talked about what are the rankings of importance? What would the board think? Now, my view would be, if we ask the same questions to boards, we would see that the answers around overall cost of risk or total cost of risk, claim costs and premiums would be ranked a lot higher on average, not by everybody, but on average, than some of these other factors. And so again, there's a bit of a gap there between what we are thinking about and the perception of what's important for us as people who are passionate about safety versus the people that are thinking about running the business. A bit of further context on that, just with some data. So we work with AXA, which is one of the big insurers, and there's an article on their website talking about where they share some of their claim costs, and this was from 2018, so it's a few years ago, but the picture hasn't really changed. And what they shared was that slips was far and away the biggest cause of claim, 80 million a year of slips. Manual handling was number 2, 30 million a year, and then everything else, including trips, was a lot lower. So if we start to think about things from a financial cost perspective, and I'm not saying that we have to do that, but this is opening up something of a discussion, then those two of those top 3 issues that we say are relevant to us actually are the two most expensive things. And if we believe that the board is perhaps more interested in premiums, costs, and all that other stuff, perhaps we should be shifting the perception of where we should focus our priority onto some of these things that could maybe save some money. So thinking here as a suggestion for discussion, are we better off moving away from our perception to thinking about total cost of risk? Perhaps this might be the way to go to try to bridge this gap. Then we're aligning perhaps a bit more with the board. We're getting a bit more influence. We're able to shape things. And then that kind of flywheel sort of continues. So that was kind of some thinking that I had. Let me see. Louis, why don't you come in first? Because Simon and Kevin have their hands raised, but they've already spoken. So I will come to you guys, but let's go again.
I just want to put my point basically from a military point of view. Obviously, we do have a lot of back problems, and we went through a phase where back problems, and it still is a real issue, but I think there's a certain amount of sometimes stigma put on people with back problems because it's so hard to diagnose and basically find out if people have real back problems. Now, this is, especially in the military, this is a problem, and I think that's sometimes why for us it's not always a priority, because a lot of people seem to think that if you do report a back problem, then you would look like, well, are you actually really sick, or are you just making it up? That kind of stigma around it. So I think that's why, from my point of view, it's not really as high a priority in the military as it should be. I wonder if that may be the same in some other industries. I mean, we're going through the same thing now with mental health as well. So it's kind of, as people just saying that they have mental health or not. So it is a real issue and a problem, because we do have people that try and get away with things. So it's very difficult sometimes to actually really know if people is just making it up, or is it a real problem. So I wonder if that could be a reason why it's maybe not always the priority that it should be.
Yeah, interestingly, in the military, if you think of the sheer investment that is made into every single one of your colleagues to get them trained and operational and achieving that sort of peak level of performance, the sheer cost of that is huge. And if you think about, sort of dehumanize this a little bit, and you think about people, and this is analogous to other industries as well, but just the military, just to me, it comes across so clearly because of the sheer training and investment into it. But if you think of, dehumanize these people and think of them as an asset, and then if you compare them to, let's say, a tank, so how much does a tank cost? I've got no idea. Is it 10 million quid? I don't know, it might be more, but let's say it was 10 million quid. How much does it cost of training and development to get somebody to be a general? It's probably not far off 10 million quid. But yet, if a tank was broken, we'd go and fix it straight away. But if a person's broken, we sort of don't seem to rush necessarily to deal with it in the same speed and with the same level of commitment. So yeah, it's just an interesting thing to think about. Chris, did you want to come in?
Morning, Chris. Morning, everyone. We're all okay. I did want to say something, but I think Richard Schott has stole my thunder already on the chat, and I totally agree with him. I think from a safety management and a risk management, it's very much on language and terminology, what you're using with different audiences. It's all the same thing. When you're talking about accidents on the shop floor to lost time incidents and efficiency to other SLT members, to then pounds and premiums to the board, it's all one of the same thing. It's just the terminology you're using to put your message and your point across to gain a little bit of traction and momentum in what your agenda is. So yeah, I agree with Richard.
I'm a big believer of that, and I can't remember, Chris, if you were on any of these sessions, but I've done a couple of these roundtables about communication, and because I think it's really important, and it's something that, you know, for me and some of you on the call will be the same. You know, I'm not leading a safety team within a business. You know, I'm involved in the safety industry and I work in my area and stuff, but I have to. It's all about communicating for me, how to get that message across, and it's, you know, different communication to a CEO, to a health and safety manager, to, you know, a kitchen porter or a cleaner, to say, you know, this is how you can, this is why you need to take this seriously, and this is what you can do to kind of keep yourself and your colleagues safe. And, you know, it's really important to think about all those different messages at the different levels.
I try not to use negative terminology. It turns people off, you know, regulation or trying to scare someone to jump on your board, to jump on your agenda, especially board members. I don't see it. I see more spinning that cost reduction initiative as an opportunity for you as a safety or a risk manager to gain more traction as well. So it's more this is what you can have, rather than this is what you could be fined with, or this is what you could go to prison. I've seen some other people say that as well. So yeah, it's very much on terminology and language and the aims of the business as well. Of course, everyone wants to keep people safe, but it's also what's the benefit of the business for doing that as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Chris. Simon.
Going back to David Wilson's comment, my first paid employment is involved in health and safety on the highways and meeting all of it really hard time to because they've been across another company, and I'm in the first time in the pristine high vis. They're all in the grubby ones. They've been out on site doing the work, and I'm introduced. Do you remember so by their manager? And a few of them go, yeah. Well, this guy is to make sure that you're not going to one of your colleagues. You're not like to see. And everybody just listened, took on board, and came and talked to me and went, yes, great, what can we do? That was the best way of getting buy-in from the guys on the ground. It was quite shocking. I didn't know quite how to take it because I didn't know I was going to be introduced like that. But I couldn't agree more. Sometimes you need that shock. The other
Simon, you're getting a little bit muffled sometimes. I don't know. It seems to be when you're sitting up and sitting back in your chair, it's okay, but when you're leaning forwards, it goes a bit muffled.
Well, is it better? Is it better there?
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah.
It's incredible. Sorry about that. Just a quick question then for you, Christian. With your insurance claims on the retail sector, do you have a breakdown on how many of those are from the public and how many are from employees? Because I think there is maybe a different attitude to claiming that the management will see
Yeah.
They are focusing more on the playing culture, whatever you want to call it. That yes, somebody slips in the supermarket, they're going to claim because they've been told they have a right, they've been injured. Whereas an employee, unless it is a serious, a break or whatever, they'll almost put it down as a near miss. I had a slip, but it didn't hurt. So, is there a breakdown on that?
Yeah. So just to clarify, the article on the website is entitled "Slip Risks in Retail," but the numbers that I shared are the overall numbers for AXA. So they're not just the numbers for retail. So the 80 million of slips and 30 million of manual handling is AXA UK as a whole. If you look at them as a proportion of the overall market, they've probably got, well, I'd imagine less than 5% of the overall market. So therefore you can extrapolate those numbers and get to sort of an overall kind of rough idea of market size. In terms of the split between employers' liability and public liability claims, it does obviously vary by industry, but overall, I think it's something like 60-40 in terms of public liability, members of the public, or it may even be 70-30. So there are many more accidents and claims, suffered by or brought by members of the public rather than staff. Kevin,
thank you.
Just want to what David Wilson was saying earlier kind of got me thinking as well about using risk management as a vehicle to go up to the board, and I was just wondering about if do you know how quality ISO 9001 is all board related? It's very, very highly focused. 18001 never used to be, and I'm wondering if the alignment of the clauses, and the more use of an IMS will actually help to elevate the status of safety and obviously environment up into the board level, so they might take it as serious as they would have taken the business related quality issues and quality management programs. And that integration will actually help, because obviously, I do a lot of work with companies internationally on the three big standards: ISO 9000, 14000, 45000. And there's a big calling at the moment for an integration of those three rather than the standalone systems, which I think is the way forward. And I'm wondering if that will give more visibility to actually use safety as a vehicle for improvement, because one of the big elements within that is control of risk, and it's all leadership focused. So I just wondered, if that will be, and I know that's why they've done that with the standards, but I just wonder if that would actually transpose across, and if we understand that properly, those people are actually running those IMSs and developing those IMSs and making them functional for the work crews, rather than just tick box exercise. So they're actually become a vehicle for improvement rather than just hey, we've got this and we can now tender with the big oil and gas companies, for example. So it was just another thought on the back of the the incident reporting. And then there was another comment that was made down by what was it? It was I can't remember now. I can't find it.
The chat's been going well today. It's great.
The chat's been going really well. I've not been focusing on it for the moment. And there's a comment about, go back to this near miss thing. I know your incidents, and it was interesting what was being said there about the perception of the public being injured from a slip versus an employee. And I'm wondering, are the employee rates lower because people are worried about potentially losing their jobs, or having some form of negative repercussion if they do report an injury from a slip, and because of the safety culture of that organization? Whereas if you're a member of the public and you walk in and report a slip, you've really got nothing to lose. Whereas if you're an employee, you might have that stigma of, depending on what the safety culture of the organization was, it might be negatively perceived against you. So I don't know. I was just thinking. I think everything within management systems and safety culture improvement, and why people do what they do. So I was just going on different tangents there in my head.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's my 2 pence for the day.
No, that's good. You touched upon something that I've spoken about before, and I going back to what I was saying earlier, that I think we need to do something as a group to sort of drive home this point that we're really critical and we're more important than people think in terms of what we can do from a safety perspective. The missing link to me is all we need to do. It sounds easy, and I'm not trying to make it sound easy, but all we need to do, I think, is prove the link between safety and high performance in business. Because every board and CEO knows that high performance is what they want, because that leads to all sorts of other things. So all we've got to do is we haven't got to draw a line between safety and bottom line even, or safety and other things. We just need to draw that line and prove the point that making people feel safer and be safer and reducing risk and so on drives higher performance in the business. And then I think that's where we unlock the key.
I agree, mate. And that's kind of my point, referencing the new 9001 standard and the new 45001 standard, because in a boardroom, you talk about quality, you talk about downtime, you talk about loss of production. That was all focused around the 9001 systems. Okay, and how do we improve? Right. Well, what do we do? Well, we set objectives, we measure objectives, we measure KPIs, and what I'm really hoping is with the merging of the clauses is that is going to feed across into the safety and the environment sectors as well, and give it the same level of focus at that board level. It's not going to happen quickly, but the more and more it's being spoken about, and the more, when I've ran many management systems for different organizations, and whenever you go into, they're always looking at the sales targets, they're always looking at the quality targets, they're looking at the customer satisfaction targets. And now with an IMS, you're throwing up your incident stats, how many near misses you're having. So the conversation's starting to escalate up to that board level without us having to push it. And I think it was David Thomas that said about board members, people sitting on board members. Everybody on here knows I've worked most of my life in the Middle East, and whenever we had management review meetings or board meetings, right, I was very lucky, but I would sit in those meetings as the head of safety, and if there was something that I had to say, we would discuss it from a financial point of view as well as from a personal point of view. But I don't know if it's because we did have a fatality and it brought that to the top, but it did happen before that as well. So I think it's all about the perception that the management team have and the trust that the management team have in you as a safety professional. Going back to myself with this team of directors that I worked with them from 2016 to 2001. Okay, and they would come to me very regularly and ask me for my advice. They would include me in the board meetings. I would run the management review meetings for them and include all of the evidence or all of the elements across there, and we'd have a full day out just talking about it. And I think that possibly the board members are more receptive to it than we actually maybe give them credit to. Maybe that's how I'll end on that for today.
Good stuff. I'm conscious of time. I just want to share quickly next week's topic, and it's a shame because when I share, I won't be able to see everybody's faces. But this is next week's topic, which I'm looking forward to. So, are we something at safety? So I'll look forward to discussing that with you, and we're going to pick up actually part of that discussion, Isaac. And I'm going to come to you in a second again. We'll pick up on some of these broader issues around safety and health rather than just safety. So Eilish has got her hand up. I'll go to her, and then if anybody else wants to chime in, feel free. But I want to be respectful of everybody's time because we are coming up for an hour. So as much as I'd love to blather on all day, I think we should try and be respectful. Eilish, what else did you want to comment on?
Sorry, I'll try and keep it quick. First of all, Kevin, really loving your GoldenEye Nintendo 64 in the background. Great choice. And I also just wanted to comment because I've been in the retail industry for the last 10, 11 years. So for me, health and safety has always been, very kind of political. And I think it's great to kind of hear from other people's perspective that sort of employee versus customer sort of what's the word, like thinking. That's my English is not great this morning. But yeah, I will say from the sort of employee perspective, nothing is ever reported. So as you can all probably imagine, nothing gets reported to the HSE. There's nothing reported internally. And, they're not even looked at as, like a kind of traditional KPI in the sense as, sales and targets would be, as opposed to kind of your LTIs and riddles and everything else. So really interesting to see where that might progress to in the future. But I think Simon made some really good points of having both client and employee. I don't know. It's very interesting.
Yeah, no, it's yeah. I mean, I think Richard just said in the chat, I've hit a nerve with today's topic, and I do try to hit a nerve with all of the topics. But yeah, today's been very, very, very good. Rosemary, you've got your hand up. I'm going to come to you, and then Isaac, and then I'm going to draw the meeting to a close. If Isaac had his hand up, and he's put it down now. But Rosemary.
Yeah, very quickly. I kind of agree with everything everybody's saying. I've just left my last company purely because I'm just sick and tired of disjointed behaviour. They want safety, but they're not prepared to pay for it. And the comment somebody made, and absolutely correct, about joining together 9,000, 14,000 and 45,000 is absolutely critical, because they are on the same platform and the processes and principles are so much the same. But you get them banging on about 9,001 and ignoring the other two, or they talk about 40,001 because they're suddenly conscious of their shareholders. But it's all lip service. And if anybody's got a bright idea of how you actually get their attention, apart from banging their heads or having a major incident, I would love to hear it, because I'm sick and tired of preaching the same thing and actually getting lots of buy-in, and then suddenly, oops, our priorities have changed. So we never actually kind of get things to the line, and it's frustrating, as you can tell probably from my voice.
No, and I'm sure you're not the only one. And perhaps what we'll do in September, if those of you that don't know, I have a real focus on slips. So I do this kind of campaign called Sliptember. So the roundtable is going to be quite focused on slips in September, but perhaps in October we can return to this, because I do think that actually, if we think about what we could do as a group of people that would make the most impact in the world and make a big dent in the universe, if we could solve this problem of making it easier to not only want safety but also pay for it because there's a good justification, that would be a great thing we could do. So I think perhaps we can return to that.
About joining the dots is so critically important. If you can't catch their hearts, at least you can get their minds, and hopefully you can get all the bits in between.
Yes, definitely. Isaac, what do you want to finish us off with?
Yeah, I just want to go back to what David Thomason was saying about broadening our knowledge in the way that probably as a safety professional, we have to be like business owners. So we have to understand we have to have, let's say, wear different hats. So it depends on which we are speaking, the person that we are speaking to, we are relating to. We have to be able to get down to what they understand, what their language is, how they receive things. So I believe that I'm having understanding of who we are speaking to, and let's say broader knowledge, do some courses about business, what the business people are focusing on, and that will help us as well to come across as people that know what they are talking about. They understand risk for the business, and as well they are there to improve the business, not just to take money just for money's sake. So that's my contribution on that.
Good stuff. Well, look, guys, thank you very much. I really, really enjoyed today. Some great interventions on the video /audio, some great stuff going on in the chat as well. it sounds to me like this is a topic we could do some further justice to in the future as well. So really appreciate everybody's help and support today. Do join us next week when we talk about are we HI something at safety. That should provoke some strong opinions as well. Yeah, let's keep the conversation going. I've been thinking about setting up a group or something like that, maybe on LinkedIn, and we could have some of these conversations going. So watch this space, and perhaps we'll do something like that as well. All right, thanks very much, guys. See you all next week.